In the vast expanse of the galaxy, a planet stood alone, distant from others, enveloped in mystery and power. It was ruled by a queen, known across the universe for her beauty, intellect, and unmatched authority. Her people revered her, but they feared her as well. No one dared question her decisions, for they knew that to cross the queen meant facing certain doom. On this planet, in a world unknown to many, there arrived an unexpected visitor, an ordinary human traveler named David. His ship had crashed while traversing the deep space between worlds, and he found himself stranded on a planet that was nothing like the Earth he knew. The air was thick and the sky gleamed with hues of purple and green. Alien creatures roamed the land, but none were like the beings he had ever seen. David was lost, alone, and with no means of escape. As he wandered through the strange land, David was drawn to a magnificent palace that stood tall in the distance. The architecture was otherworldly, with sharp angles and shimmering surfaces that seemed to hum with power. A feeling of awe and dread filled him as he approached, unsure of what awaited him. The gates opened automatically as he neared, as if the palace knew he was coming. Inside, the queen's court was unlike any place David had ever imagined. The chamber was vast, stretching high into the heavens. Figures in ornate armor stood in formation, their eyes never leaving David. And then he saw her, the queen. She was tall, with a commanding presence that filled the room the moment she entered. Her eyes were cold and piercing, yet there was a hint of curiosity beneath her exterior. David stood frozen, unsure of his next move. He had heard stories of the queen, stories that spoke of her power, her strength, and her unwillingness to show mercy. But here, in her presence, he was struck with a strange sense of calm. Maybe it was the enormity of the palace or the sheer force of her aura, but for the first time since his crash, David felt the weight of his situation. The queen, observing him with keen interest, raised her hand slightly, signaling the guards to step back. Her gaze never left him, studying every detail of his presence. It was as if she was trying to understand why he had come. "Who are you, human?" she asked, her voice smooth and melodic, yet powerful enough to make the air tremble. David stammered, taken aback by the queen's directness. I'm just a traveler. My ship crashed. I didn't mean to intrude." The queen's lips curled into a faint smile, though it wasn't one of warmth. It was a smile of curiosity, the smile of someone who saw through him, someone who knew more than they let on. "A traveler, you say? And what brings you to my world, Earthling?" David felt a sense of dread creep over him. I didn't choose to come here. My ship malfunctioned and I ended up in your atmosphere by accident." The queen's expression softened ever so slightly, but it was hard to tell if she felt sympathy or amusement. She stepped closer, her long robe trailing behind her, and she extended her hand. The motion was elegant, almost ceremonial. David hesitated, unsure whether to take her hand, but something inside urged him to do so. He extended his hand, and to his surprise, the queen took it gently. Her skin was cool to the touch, and a strange energy seemed to pulse through her fingertips as if she were more than just flesh and bone. There was a power to her, something beyond what any human could understand. "I've been watching you, human," the queen said, her voice barely above a whisper, though it echoed through the chamber. "You are different from the others." David's heart raced. "Different? How?" The queen's gaze flickered briefly to the side as if contemplating something deep within her. Then she turned her attention back to him. "You are the first to land here and offer something without expecting anything in return. Your gift is small, but it holds more value than you realize." David's mind raced. What gift was she talking about? He hadn't given her anything. The queen reached behind her and pulled out a small, intricate box. It was a deep crimson with gold markings etched along the sides. "This," she said, holding the box up for David to see, "is the gift I speak of." David blinked, confused. "But I didn't give you anything." The queen's smile widened ever so slightly, and she nodded. "You did. You gave me your trust." She opened the box, revealing a glowing orb that pulsed with energy. much like the planet itself. It was beautiful, yet it held a strange, unexplainable power. This, the Queen continued, is the symbol of your sincerity, your pure offering. It holds the key to what is to come. David stared at the orb in awe. There was no way to understand its significance, but he felt a deep connection to it, as if it were calling to him, pulling him into its world. "I don't understand," David said, his voice shaky. "What does this mean for me?" "For you?" The Queen's eyes locked onto his, her expression unreadable. "You will know in time, human. This is only the beginning. The gift you gave me has sealed your fate. You will soon learn the consequences of your actions." David could feel the weight of her words. He had no idea what lay ahead, but he knew one thing for sure. His life would never be the same again. He had given her a gift, and in return the alien Queen had given him a destiny he could not escape. The tension in the room was palpable as the Queen placed the glowing orb into David's hands. His heart beat faster as he realized that the moment he had just experienced would be remembered forever, not just by him, but by the entire galaxy. And so, with a single gift, everything had changed. As the days passed, David found himself increasingly drawn into the palace, unable to escape the overwhelming sense of destiny that seemed to be pulling him in. His encounter with the Queen, the mysterious gift, and the orb's power had left him in a state of confusion and wonder. Despite the coldness of the alien world around him, he couldn't shake the feeling that something extraordinary was happening. The Queen, whose name he had learned was Lyra, had not said much since that fateful moment in the grand hall. She would summon him occasionally, giving him strange tasks that had no clear purpose but seemed to be pushing him toward something greater. She would watch him closely, her piercing gaze never leaving him as he worked, as if testing him in ways he couldn't comprehend. David couldn't help but feel a sense of responsibility growing inside him. It wasn't just the Queen's expectations that weighed on him. It was the feeling that he was part of something much larger, something far beyond the limits of his own understanding. One evening, as the sun set and the palace's lights flickered on, casting an ethereal glow on the hallways, David found himself once again summoned to the Queen's private chambers. This time, the air was different, less formal, more intimate. The guards stood at attention outside, but there was a sense of calm in the air, an unspoken invitation to step closer to the truth. He entered the room and found Queen Lyra sitting by a large window, gazing out at the distant stars. The light of the twin moons bathed her in a soft glow, and for the first time she didn't seem like the powerful ruler of a distant planet. She appeared vulnerable. David hesitated before stepping forward. "You called for me, Your Majesty." His voice felt small in the vast chamber, unsure of what to expect. Lyra turned her head slowly, her silver hair shimmering in the moonlight. "David," she said softly, a rare tenderness in her voice. "I have been watching you. Not just your actions, but your heart." David blinked, confused. "My heart?" "Yes," she replied, her gaze shifting to the glowing orb on the table before her. "It is not your skill or strength that has caught my attention, but your sincerity. It is something rare, even in my world." David felt his chest tighten. "I'm just an ordinary man, Lyra. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I didn't ask for your attention." Lyra stood up, walking slowly toward him. Her movements were graceful, almost hypnotic. "You are wrong, David. There is nothing ordinary about you. You've shown me something that no one else has. Genuine selflessness. You've shown me something that no one else has. Genuine selflessness." She paused in front of him, her eyes locking onto his. "That is why I've chosen you." David's heart raced. Chosen? Chosen for what? For the first time, Lyra smiled, a faint, almost wistful expression. "You are more than just a visitor to my world. You are my chosen mate." The words hit him like a bolt of lightning. He had suspected something was different, but this was far beyond anything he could have imagined. The Queen, The powerful alien ruler who had been feared across galaxies had chosen him as her partner. And though it should have been a moment of celebration, all David felt was confusion. "But why me?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "I'm nothing compared to you. I'm just a traveler." Lyra placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch light but firm. "That's the very reason, David. You see, I have been bound by my responsibilities, my power for so long. I've forgotten what it means to be human, to connect with someone not because of their status but because of their heart. You've reminded me of that, and for that, I am grateful." David looked into her eyes, searching for any hint of insincerity. But all he saw was a depth of emotion that took him by surprise. He had expected to see only the Queen's power, her coldness, but instead he found a woman who was, at her core, deeply lonely. She had spent her life surrounded by the trappings of royalty, but never had she known a connection like this. "I don't understand," David admitted, his voice heavy with doubt. "How can I be your mate? We're from completely different worlds." Lyra stepped closer, her hand brushing against his cheek. "Perhaps we are from different worlds, David, but in the end we are both creatures of the universe. You have a heart capable of seeing beyond the surface, beyond the power and status that we both carry. That is what binds us." David's thoughts were in turmoil. He had never expected this. He had never even thought of the Queen in such terms, until now. Her words, her touch, were starting to break down the walls he had built around his heart. Maybe he was beginning to see what she saw in him. Maybe, just maybe, there was something more between them than he had realized. But as much as he wanted to believe her, doubts still lingered. He was a man from Earth, an ordinary man who had stumbled into an extraordinary situation. He had never imagined he would be here, standing in the presence of an alien queen, feeling a bond with her that defied all logic. "Are you afraid?" Lyra asked, her voice softer now, almost vulnerable. David hesitated. "I don't know. I'm afraid of what all this means, what it could cost. But I'm afraid of not knowing you better." Lyra smiled, her eyes filled with warmth. "Then let's take this journey together, David. One step at a time. We don't need to have all the answers right now." For the first time, David felt the weight of the unknown becoming something he could face. Maybe this bond, so unlikely, was the beginning of something greater than either of them could have imagined. And so, as the two of them stood in the quiet of the chamber, the stars outside seeming to shine just a little brighter, they took their first step into a future that was uncertain, but filled with promise. The Queen and the human, an unlikely bond that would change everything. Days passed and the bond between David and Lyra grew stronger, but neither of them truly understood the depth of what was unfolding. For David, the strange, unexpected events kept his mind in constant turmoil. On one hand, he felt an undeniable connection to Lyra, an alien queen who had chosen him as her mate. On the other hand, his heart struggled with the immense responsibility that such a relationship carried. He was a human and she was a being of immense power. The weight of their bond was as heavy as the stars above their heads. Lyra, for her part, had spent centuries leading her people with authority, never once questioning her decisions. She had seen countless suitors, heard endless declarations of loyalty and admiration, but never had she felt the stirrings of affection or love until now. David had brought something to her life that she had long forgotten: vulnerability, connection, and an emotion she had thought impossible for someone of her station: love. As they spent more time together, their conversations deepened. They talked about everything: his world, her world, their hopes and their fears. David had started to see Lyra not just as a queen, but as someone he could truly understand, someone with her own dreams and struggles. But despite their closeness, there was an unspoken tension between them, one that neither had the words to address. Their bond, though growing, still carried with it an aura of uncertainty. Was it real? Was it meant to be? Or was this just the result of some cosmic fluke? One evening, as they walked through the palace gardens, David could sense something had changed in Lyra. She was quieter than usual, her usual confidence tempered with a deep inner turmoil. She kept glancing at him, her expression unreadable, and David knew something was on the horizon, something that would change everything. "David." Lyra's voice broke the silence as they reached a quiet part of the garden, far away from the prying eyes of the court. "There is something I must tell you." David's heart skipped a beat. He turned to her, trying to read the seriousness in her eyes. "What is it, Lyra?" She took a deep breath, her gaze turning to the stars above. For a moment, she appeared lost in thought, as if she were gathering the courage to say something monumental. When she spoke again, her voice was soft, almost hesitant. "I've spent my life as a queen, David," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been taught to rule with strength, to make decisions based on logic and power. I've never allowed myself to let anyone close to me, never allowed anyone to truly see me for who I am." David stepped closer, sensing the vulnerability in her words. "But you've let me in," he said gently, "and I'm honored. I'm not like the others." Lyra turned to face him, her eyes searching his. "No, you're not. You've done what no one else has. You've seen me as a person, not as a queen, and that's why I'm here telling you this." David felt a shiver run down his spine. "Tell me what, Lyra?" "I'm asking you to stay with me," she said, her voice trembling slightly, a hint of uncertainty betraying her usual regal composure. "I'm asking you to be by my side, not just as my companion, but as my future husband. This is not something I take lightly. I've never asked anyone to be with me this way, but I can't deny what I feel. I can't deny that you are the one I want beside me, now and always." David stood there in shock, his mind racing as the words echoed in his ears. The queen, Lyra, the alien queen who had never shown any sign of weakness or emotion, was asking him to marry her. He wasn't sure if he had heard her correctly or if his brain was playing tricks on him. The enormity of her proposal hit him all at once, overwhelming him with a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. "Lyra, I don't know what to say," David stammered, his heart pounding in his chest. I never thought this would happen. You're the queen of this entire galaxy. You could have anyone by your side." Lyra's eyes softened, a small, sad smile playing on her lips. "I've had many suitors, David. Many who have tried to win my favor, but none who have truly seen me. None who have shown me the kindness, the purity of heart that you have. I've chosen you not because you are the strongest or the most powerful, but because you are the one who has touched my heart. I never thought I could feel love, but with you I have." David swallowed hard, his mind still reeling. He had known there was something special between them, but marriage? To an alien queen? No less? It seemed impossible, yet everything in his heart told him that this was real. "But how?" he asked, his voice trembling. "How can I be your husband? I'm just a human. My life, my world, it's all so different from yours. How can I fit into your world?" Lyra stepped forward, gently cupping his face with her hands. "David, love doesn't have to fit into a mold. It doesn't have to follow the rules of the universe. What matters is that we are together. What matters is that we both have chosen each other, and that is enough." David's heart surged with emotion. He had never expected this. Never imagined he would be standing here in this alien world, with an alien queen asking him to become her husband. But as he looked into Lyra's eyes, he felt an overwhelming sense of rightness. Despite the vast differences between them, he knew that this was where he was meant to be, with her. "I don't know what the future holds, Lyra," David said, his voice steady now. "But I do know this. I don't want to live it without you." Lyra's eyes sparkled with joy, and she leaned forward, kissing him gently on the lips. The kiss was soft, but it carried with it the weight of all the emotions they had shared and all the promises they had yet to make. And so, in that moment, the impossible became reality. The human and the alien queen were bound together, not by duty or power, but by a love that defied the stars themselves, a love that would change their worlds forever. The days following Lyra's proposal were filled with uncertainty and contemplation. David found himself torn between his heart and his mind. The queen, who had once seemed so distant and unapproachable, was now the person he felt closest to in the galaxy. But despite the bond they shared, there were so many questions swirling in his mind. Could he truly be the mate of an alien queen? Could he leave behind everything he knew on Earth to be with her in this unfamiliar, dangerous world? He spent long hours alone in his quarters, staring out of the window at the alien landscape below, the stars above seeming to mock him with their vast, unchanging nature. He had come to this place by accident, and now his life was forever altered. Everything had changed, but he still had no idea where the path ahead would lead. Lyra had given him time to think, to process, to come to terms with what had happened. She had told him that she would not pressure him, that the decision was his alone to make. But that only made the choice harder. How could he say no to her, knowing what they shared? How could he refuse the opportunity to be with someone so extraordinary, someone who had chosen him out of all the beings in the galaxy? One evening, as the twin moons hung low in the sky, casting their soft light over the palace, David found himself once again summoned to the Queen's chambers. His heart raced with anticipation, knowing that this moment would change everything. The decision he made tonight would define the rest of his life. When he entered the room, Lyra was waiting for him, seated on a throne that seemed to glow with an otherworldly light. She looked serene, her posture regal, yet there was a trace, a vulnerability in her eyes that David had never seen before. It was as if she too was waiting for him to make the next move. "David," she said, her voice soft but steady, "I've waited for you to make your decision, and I will respect whatever you choose." David walked toward her slowly, his heart pounding in his chest. The weight of the moment was almost unbearable, but he knew what he had to do. He had spent enough time questioning, doubting, and fearing. Now, it was time to act. Time to embrace the unknown. Time to step into a future that was uncertain but full of possibilities. "I've thought about it a lot," David said, his voice thick with emotion. "And I've come to a decision." Lyra's gaze softened, and she leaned forward slightly, her expression filled with hope. "What is your decision, David?" David took a deep breath, gathering the courage to say the words that would change their lives forever. "I choose you, Lyra. I choose this. I choose you as my future, my queen, my everything." The moment those words left his lips, he felt a wave of relief wash over him. The decision, though difficult, was the right one. In that moment, he knew that this was where he was meant to be. With Lyra. In this strange, beautiful, and dangerous world, Lyra's eyes filled with tears as she stood up and stepped toward him. She placed her hands gently on his face, her touch warm and tender. "You have chosen me, David, and now I will choose you. You are no longer just a human traveler. You are my equal, my partner, my future." David felt his heart swell with emotion as he gazed into her eyes. He had never imagined he would find himself here, standing beside an alien queen, in a foreign world, with a love that defied all logic. But it was real. It was true. Lyra took his hand and led him to the center of the room, where a large circular platform stood, illuminated by a soft, shimmering light. "This is the beginning of a new era," she said softly. "Not just for you and me, but for my people, for your people, and for the entire galaxy." David looked around, realizing the significance of the moment. This wasn't just about their love. It was about uniting two worlds, two very different species, to create something new, something better. "This is our beginning," Lyra continued, "and it will be a beginning like no other. Together we will bring our worlds together, not with force or power, but with love and understanding." As she spoke, David felt a surge of excitement and hope fill his chest. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges, political unrest, cultural differences, the lingering doubts of others who didn't understand their union. But they would face it all together, as equals, as partners, as husband and wife. The soft glow of the platform seemed to intensify, surrounding them in a warm, radiant light. In that moment, David realized that this was his new reality. The human who had once been stranded on a distant planet was now the chosen mate of an alien queen, bound to a future that was as unknown as it was exhilarating. The weight of the decision had lifted, replaced by a sense of purpose and determination. He was no longer just a traveler lost in the galaxy. He was David, the mate of Queen Lyra. Together they would forge a path forward, one that would not only change their lives, but also the fate of both their worlds. Lyra smiled at him, her eyes filled with love and gratitude. "We are no longer bound by the past, David. Our future is limitless." David smiled back, feeling the truth of her words deep in his soul. "Together, Lyra. Always." And with that, they stepped forward into the unknown, hand in hand, ready to face whatever the universe had in store for them. Together they would build a future not just for themselves, but for the galaxy.